I had been looking forward to my weekend getaway for months. After weeks of relentless work, I finally booked a secluded Airbnb cabin in the woods. It was small but cozy, surrounded by towering pines and complete with a picturesque fireplace. The listing had glowing reviews, praising its charm and solitude. When I arrived, the cabin was exactly as described, almost too perfect. The furniture was quaint, the kitchen spotless, and the view from the large windows was breathtaking. But there was something strange I couldn't quite put my finger on. The first thing I noticed was the guest book on the coffee table. Most Airbnbs I'd stayed at had one, but this one was different. Instead of happy notes about the stay, the pages were filled with frantic scrawls. I felt like I was being watched. "Don't stay here alone. The mirrors. Don't look in the mirrors at night." I laughed nervously, assuming it was some kind of joke left by a group of drunk guests. The last entry, however, gave me chills. "If you hear footsteps, leave immediately." I snapped the book shut and decided to brush it off. The reviews online had been stellar after all. Maybe it was just someone trying to scare the next guest. The first night was uneventful, though I did feel an odd sense of unease. The cabin was dead silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards as the house settled. I told myself I was just being paranoid. The second night, though, things got strange. As I was lying in bed reading, I heard faint shuffling downstairs. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate. My stomach turned as I strained to listen. It stopped. I convinced myself it must have been the wind or an animal outside. But then I heard it again. This time it was louder, unmistakably coming from inside the house. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the bedroom door. The hallway was dark, and the air felt heavy, oppressive. I crept down the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears. When I reached the living room, it was empty. I checked the door. It was locked. The windows, too. Everything was as I had left it. Feeling foolish, I decided to make some tea to calm my nerves. As I stood in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, I glanced at the large mirror above the fireplace. I froze. In the reflection, I saw a figure standing at the base of the stairs. It was just a shadow, barely distinguishable, but it was there. I spun around, but the room was empty. My breath came in short gasps as I backed away toward the bedroom, clutching my phone. I decided I'd leave in the morning. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to spend another night there. I barely slept, jolting awake at every creak and groan of the house. At around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps, this time outside my bedroom door. They stopped just as suddenly as they had started. I mustered the courage to open the door, and there was nothing there. But when I turned to look in the mirror on the dresser, I saw something I'll never forget. It was me, or rather my reflection, but my face wasn't moving. I stared in horror as my reflection slowly smiled, even though my own face was frozen in terror. That was it. I grabbed my bag, threw on my shoes, and bolted. I drove into town and spent the rest of the night in my car. The next day, I left a curt review warning others about the strange happenings. But when I checked back a few weeks later, my review was gone. The listing was still up, with more glowing reviews praising the peaceful atmosphere. Every now and then I think about that cabin and wonder if anyone else experienced what I did. But I'll never go back to find out. I had always loved staying at unique Airbnbs, quirky apartments, historic homes, even the occasional yurt. So when I found a listing for a rustic farmhouse in the countryside, I couldn't resist. The photos showed a charming old house with ivy creeping up the walls and a sprawling garden. It was isolated, exactly what I needed to unplug and relax for the weekend. The host, Marie, was responsive and friendly, though a bit odd. Her messages were polite but overly specific. "Please ensure you arrive before sunset. The lockbox code is 1723. Do not use the back door under any circumstances." When I arrived, The house was exactly as it had looked in the photos, quaint, picturesque, and surrounded by endless fields. But as I got out of the car, I noticed something odd. There were no other houses nearby, no barns, not even a mailbox. It was as if the house had been dropped into the middle of nowhere. I shrugged it off and went inside. The interior was cozy, with vintage furniture and a faint scent of lavender. A welcome note sat on the kitchen counter, written in the same overly formal tone. Welcome to your stay. Please make yourself comfortable, but remember to lock the doors before dark. Do not explore the garden after sundown. That last part struck me as strange. Why not? But I brushed it off as some kind of rural superstition. The first evening was peaceful. I cooked a simple dinner and watched the sunset from the porch. The view was stunning, but the silence felt almost too deep, too absolute. As darkness fell, the house seemed to change. The creaks in the floorboards felt louder, and the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch longer. I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easily. Around midnight, I woke up to a sound outside. It was faint, like footsteps crunching on gravel. I froze, listening intently. The sound came closer, circling the house. I told myself it was probably a deer or some other animal. But then the sound stopped, and a single knock echoed through the house. It wasn't at the front door. It was at the back. The one I had been told not to use, heart pounding. I stayed frozen in bed, clutching my phone. Another knock came, slow and deliberate. I wanted to check, to prove to myself there was nothing there, but my legs wouldn't move. After what felt like hours, the knocking stopped. I eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep, only to wake up at dawn. Curiosity got the better of me. I went to the back door. There was nothing there. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there at all. I stepped outside into the garden, the morning sun casting long shadows across the overgrown grass. And that's when I saw it. In the middle of the garden stood an old well, its stone rim crumbling and covered in moss. I hadn't noticed it the night before. As I approached, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something inside the well caught the light. A glint of metal. I leaned over, peering into the darkness, and realized it was a small, rusted lockbox. I hesitated, but my curiosity won out. I found a stick nearby and fished the box out. It was heavy, and the latch was rusted shut. I pried it open with a rock, revealing a stack of old photographs. They were black and white, faded with time, but the faces were clear. My stomach dropped as I flipped through them. Each photo was of a different guest standing in the garden, smiling awkwardly for the camera. And in the background, barely visible, was the shadow of a figure standing near the well. The last photo made me drop the box. It was a picture of me. I didn't even remember taking it. But there I was, standing in the garden, looking directly at the camera, and behind me, just like in the others, was the same shadowy figure. I didn't stay to find out more. I grabbed my things and left the house, ignoring the checkout instructions. When I got home, I tried to look up the listing again, but it was gone. To this day, I can't explain what happened, but I'll never book a secluded Airbnb again. I was traveling for work and decided to book an Airbnb instead of a hotel, hoping for something quieter and more personal. The listing was for a small, modern apartment in the city center. It had great reviews, and the photos showed a sleek, minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Perfect. The host, Daniel, was polite and professional in his messages. Everything seemed straightforward. I arrived late in the evening after a long day of meetings. The building was unassuming, a nondescript block of apartments with dim hallway lighting. Inside, the apartment was just as the pictures had shown, spotless and stylish. I dropped my bag, grabbed some takeout, and settled in for the night. As I was eating, I noticed something odd. One of the windows, the largest one overlooking the street, seemed darker than the others. Even though it was nighttime, the other windows let in the glow of streetlights and passing cars. This one was pitch black. Curious, I walked over and tapped on the glass. It felt cold, almost too cold, like ice. I tried opening the curtain, but it didn't budge. It was as if it had been glued in place. Shrugging it off as a weird design choice, I turned in for the night. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a soft noise. It wasn't loud, more like a faint tapping, but it was enough to jolt me awake. I listened for a moment, unsure if I had dreamed it. Then it came again. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the dark window. I got out of bed, my heart pounding, and approached it cautiously. As I got closer, the tapping stopped. I stood there, staring at the black glass. For a moment I thought I saw something, a faint outline, like the shape of a person standing on the other side. But that made no sense. The apartment was on the 12th floor. I backed away, telling myself I was imagining things, and went back to bed. The next morning, I avoided the window altogether. But as I was getting ready to leave for my meetings, I noticed something on the coffee table. A handprint. It was faint but unmistakable, a smudge on the glass top. And it was larger than my own hand. I couldn't explain it, but I was too rushed to think about it. I spent the day distracted, unable to shake the feeling that something was off about the apartment. That evening, I returned, determined to ignore my unease and get some rest. But as I entered, I noticed something else. The curtain on the dark window was slightly open, just a crack. I froze. I knew I hadn't touched it. Summoning all my courage, I walked over and peeked through the gap. What I saw made my blood run cold. On the other side of the glass wasn't the city skyline or the street below. It was a room. An identical room to the one I was standing in. And in that room, someone was standing by the window, staring back at me. I stumbled backward, tripping over the coffee table. When I looked up again, the curtain was completely closed, and the tapping had started again, louder this time. I didn't stay to find out more. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the apartment, leaving the key on the counter. I tried contacting the host the next day to explain why I had left early, but the Airbnb listing was gone. And when I searched for the building online, I couldn't find any record of it. To this day, I don't know what I saw. All I know is that I'll never trust a window I can't see through again.